faster, healthier, better.
Hey, Heather, thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on.
So we were talking about it a little bit before off air, but you have a pretty wild story.
I do.
But I reached out to you and asked what your favorite beverage is, and you said Synergy. So I bought 3 Synergies because I didn't know which one. So we'll do a little taste test. Which one do you want to try?
I think we should start with the green one, the multi-green, and get all healthy.
Get all healthy. I think. Do we shake these?
No.
No?
Well, you could a little bit.
I shake it a little bit. It's okay.
It's going to start coming out. There you go.
Anyway.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how your story kind of happened.
So, well, for your listeners, and maybe you can put the link in the show notes, there's a whole feature story in the April edition of Toronto Life magazine, and it's called The Many Faces of Jason Porter. But I wasn't in a relationship with Jason Porter. I was in a relationship with Jace Peretti. And in the summer of 2018, very early in July, I had renovated my condo in Toronto, and he was working for the company that did all the cabinetry. So all the kitchen cupboards and the bathroom vanities. And I don't know if you've ever done a renovation, but often a few months later, things need tweaking or fixing. Mm-hmm. So the company sent him as the fixer. So I woke up on a Monday morning to a text message from him. And I was like, cool, I'm going to take my dog for a walk, come over. I literally rolled out of bed, threw my hair in a bun, threw on some shorts and a sweatshirt, no makeup, wasn't even thinking, didn't care. And maybe an hour after that text message, I hear a knock at the door, and I open the door, and lo and behold, there's this super cute guy there wearing jeans and a t-shirt. And one of the first things I noticed about him was with his smile, he has this gap between his front teeth, which I thought was just kind of cute and cool. Mm-hmm. And I let him in, and he started doing all the things that needed fixing, and we were chatting. And after he finished that, I coyly, borderline flirtatiously, one might say, asked him if he could help me do some other things because I needed to hire a handyman. So he agreed, and we were hanging the towel bars up in my different bathrooms, and we just got lost in talking, and I quickly learned a lot about him. And then all of a sudden he was like, oh, I have to go. He had to get going with his day to go see other people's places to fix. And I noticed as soon as he left that the second towel bar that we'd been hanging was kind of on a bit of an angle. And I was like, oh boy. So I tried to fix it, and I made it worse. So I ran over to the hardware store to try and get those, what do they call it? Like the anchors, so, cause I thought it doesn't even matter, cause I know nothing really about screws and drywall and that sort of stuff. And I ended up making a bit of a mess of the whole thing. But when I came back from the hardware store, I noticed that his big honking measuring tape was still on my kitchen island. So I don't know if I called him or messaged him, but somehow, whichever way it was, I was like, your measuring tape's still here. And by the way, I've made a disaster. Like, this is a disaster, the second towel bar. And he must have messaged me back and said, I'm very close by. I'm 10 minutes away. I can come back over. I'm like, great. So he came, again, knock on my door, let him in. He fixes it. And I remember I asked him what he was up to for the rest of the day. It must have been about 1:32 at this point. And he said, well, I was thinking of getting some lunch. And I said, oh, great. Me too. Why don't let me take you out as a thank you across the street? I lived right. Yeah. I wasn't even thinking in terms of that. I was just like, I felt like I should do something nice for this guy. So we went out for lunch that day, and I actually think he ended up picking up the tab, but we had a really nice time. Like, conversation was easy. I learned a bit more about him and some of his backstory. Like, he had gone to the University of Waterloo, and he was actually a computer software engineer, but he was taking a break from the corporate world right now because he's always loved working with his hands. That he was had been in a longer, like a 3-year relationship with this woman. They had a child together, but they were separated, and they were going through the family court system to work out custody, but he made it seem like they were still very amicable and things were good. And so he currently wasn't living with his son, but he could see him. He made it seem like he could almost see him whenever he wanted, which I later learned quickly was not true.
And all this was like all this conversation happened at lunch.
Yeah, well, lunch.
Because that's a lot to say.
Yeah, like we both talked.
Over time.
Yeah, and like some of that, like he didn't go into too much detail about all that. I remember also sharing with him some personal stuff on our first lunch. And then, you know, all of a sudden it's, you know, he's got to go. He goes back to the office, and I just kind of was left after that lunch, just kind of like, whoa, what just happened there? Like, was I just flirting? Mm-hmm. Like, who is this guy? And then later that evening, and keep in mind, I have every single text message between him and me from day one. Like I never deleted anything, but I texted him and I just said, hey, have you seen my screwdriver? Because being a single urban girl, I had one screwdriver with all the different heads, right? Like that's the only tool I had, and a hammer. And I don't even have a leveler. I have the app on my phone for when I'm like hanging things. So he messaged back and said something like, well, what can I say? You know, business turned kind of personal. It was one of the most WTF days in a long time. Like I wasn't about to tell the client that I am holding her screwdriver as hostage or something funny and witty like that, which that led to more texting, talking on the phone, and eventually a couple weeks later, a proper date. And I had to cancel on him once because, again, being a real estate broker, often it can be an easy excuse to get out of plans. But for the most part,
fair enough.
There are times, especially I remember that summer, I was incredibly busy with work. You know, clients want to go see places, you go see places, and most people work during the day. So you go in the evening. So I remember once having to cancel. So we eventually, maybe 2.5 weeks later from that first meeting, finally got together for our first proper dinner date. And he showed up at my place on a motorcycle, and he had a backpack because I recall he changed shoes because I guess he was probably wearing running shoes for the bike, and he just wanted to put on something a bit nicer for our date. And so he came up and changed shoes, and we walked over to a restaurant just around the corner and had a lovely dinner. And I learned more about him at dinner. I learned a bit more about what was going on with the family court stuff, that he was only allowed right now to see his kid twice a week while they were working things out, because his backstory was that he had been born in Italy and moved to Canada when he was 2. So although he has a Canadian passport and he's a Canadian citizen, he also has an Italian passport. And his ex's lawyer put it in the court's mind that he was going to kidnap the son, like abscond the kid and take him to Italy because he has his Italian passport. He could have the kid travel under him. And I was like, that's wild. So because of that, he was only seeing the kid twice a week while they were working it out in court. I also learned that his mother died when he was, I think, 18, tragically in a car accident. She was hit by a drunk driver, apparently. And a lot of, you know, I remember asking him, or I said something like, that's a lot to go through. You know, it's a lot of pain, like to lose a parent, to like be going through this family court stuff. And I said, how do you deal with it? And I remember he said, I put everything in boxes. And I know men.
That's very dangerous.
I didn't know that. But
that's funny you actually say that because, sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. Is it good?
I like how you waited until I tried it first. It's actually very good.
It's delicious. It's very green.
Very
People
green.
At home.
That's funny you say that actually, because so my dad was very abusive emotionally, physically. And whenever I went through something when I was living with him, he would also always say, actually, he wouldn't say put it in a box, but he would say, have this space and put it away. So actually my 16th birthday, which was in Calgary, he gave me a box and it was supposed to symbolize putting all of,
Baxter, come here.
Sorry guys, we have
Baxter, come here.
Special guest.
Do you want to come here? Do you want to come here?
I guess not.
Okay.
So he gave me a little like a lead box almost, and it was supposed to symbolize everything. If I'm in pain or if I'm sad or if I'm angry, to put it in there. And it created me to have really bad habits. So like whenever I got into fight with girlfriends and stuff like that, I just put it away in boxes.
Baxter, just come here. Come here. You're like totally interrupting this podcast. Come here. Come here. I'll just grab him. All right, guys.
That's okay. I like this. We're live. Listeners, watchers, this is Baxter.
Yeah. I lie. I tell people he's my emotional support dog, but he's really not. He just did it. There you go.
But yeah, so he gave me that, and it was supposed to it was empty, but it was supposed to symbolize to put all that in.
Right.
And so I created that habit when I got into arguments with my girlfriends or whatever. I would put away everything. I would shut off. Right. And luckily, I had enough help to retrain myself to not do that. So it's funny you say that, because I feel like that's a very masculine.
I think men are better at compartmentalizing things, whereas I think women, I
don't know though. I'm not trying to gas you up, but women they're pretty tough.
We're tough, but I think. Well, I even remember. I mean, this is a big fast forward in my story, but in January of 2019, so with him going through the. Okay, I can't fast forward because it's so good. So the first date is just so good. So we go for this first date. I'm learning all this stuff about him, and he tells me
puts
things in boxes, and I was like, okay, I grew up with my mom's a child psychologist, so I grew up always talking about feelings, and I'm from a family where we talk amongst ourselves,
which is very healthy.
You're right,
very healthy.
So I thought, well, I guess you have to do what you have to do, and I haven't experienced the kind of pain that. Losing a parent or like losing a child practically through, the family court. So we wrap up dinner. We walk back to my place so he can get his backpack and his motorcycle helmet. And I just remember I was actually holding Baxter in one arm and he had his backpack over his shoulder and he was holding his motorcycle helmet. We were kind of just saying our goodnights. And I do not know what possessed me to do this, but I just leaned in and gave him a kiss. I was like,
so
reenact it.
Predominantly though, in other dates, are you usually the one who makes the first move? Because it seems like you're. Or did he kind of bring that out in you?
I think he brought that out in me. I don't know. Like it'd been a while since. I've always been a pretty great flirt, but I feel like I don't know what it was about this moment in time. I just felt like I wanted to give him a goodnight kiss. So
to be honest, it seems like it's a perfect storm here. I mean, he's picking you up like Tom Cruise and Top Gun in a bike.
Right.
And then you're having a beautiful dinner and then you guys having a great flow of conversation.
Right.
Like everything's aligned.
Right. And and we just are vibing and conversation's really fluid. It's really easy. We're having fun. So I lean in and give him a kiss. And then the next thing I know is he takes my dog, he takes Baxter and puts him down, drops his helmet, drops his backpack and literally like pushes me up against the wall. And we proceed to have, to date in my life, the most passionate kiss I've ever had, where it probably went on for a good 10 minutes. And I remember like having to come up for air and it left me breathless. It left me like weak in the knees. And I think I can now say that's part of the whole narcissistic. That was like a love bomb that went off that night.
Yeah.
And it just didn't stop after that. It was literally, he messaged, I fell asleep, but I said, please message me when you get home because he had told me he was living in Oakville, which wasn't true. But the thing with my story, you have to understand too, is everything I say is what I thought was the truth. But then when it all fell apart, I realized it was pretty much all lies. So there's debunking a lot of it that happened afterwards. But so I also remember the next day I woke up to a message like from him that said something like, good morning, beautiful. I just wanted to be the first to wish you an amazing day because life is so great and you're just beautiful. And those kind of messages did not stop.
Mm-hmm.
And while I can honestly say in my 40 some odd years, I'd never gotten messages like that from a guy, I genuinely actually welcomed it because I didn't suspect ever that he was a narcissist or whatever he is. I also think he's a bit of a psychopath, but I just went with it. Like I was loving it. I was loving all of it. So we very quickly jumped into this relationship with both feet. I think I think our date was on a Wednesday night. And then the next night he came back over. On the Thursday, he came back over. He showed up at my place a bit later and he made me dessert and we drank some wine. And then one thing led to another. And my like 3-day, whatever rule was like out the window. And like he literally lifted me up from the couch, carried me to my bedroom. And I was like melted at that point because the guy I'd been dating before him was not that kind of strong.
Oh, wow.
To be able to pick me up.
Fair.
Yeah. Like, you know.
No, this sounds, honestly.
Yeah.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah. It was
so far.
It was great. And it was like, to be honest, it was great until the very, very end. I mean, sure, there were some moments where we would have like the odd fight or the odd this, but
that's normal in relationships.
Exactly.
Right?
And then, you know, you factor in just lockdowns and being so close. But I tell, like when we first went into lockdown in 2020, I was so excited. I couldn't think of like, I was like, I mean, we're going to be locked in this condo together for like all day long and all night. This is awesome.
So what happened after that?
So after that, so that would have been the summer of 2018. We had an awesome summer. We went to friends' cottages. The first gift he bought me was a motorcycle helmet. We went everywhere on that motorcycle that first summer. We had so much fun. And I loved being on the bike with him. I felt so safe and so protected and exhilarated. And it was awesome. And, you know, within a few weeks, within the first weekend, really, he started meeting my friends. And by the fall, he had met some of my family. And probably by the end of September, early October, I gave him a key and a fob to my building so he could also partly help me with Baxter. But he had moved from his big place in Oakville to this little basement apartment. He had told me he had rented the whole house so he could be closer to work. And then he realized he didn't need the whole house. So he subletted out the rest of it and was just keeping the basement apartment. And I went over there a couple of times and I really didn't like it. So we spent more time at my place than his place, but we weren't spending every night together. We still had, you know, there were just some nights we didn't spend together.
Do you think in hindsight that he was always living in that basement apartment?
He had been living there from when I met him. Like he had been living in Georgetown with his ex up until I think about March. And then he was living with when she kicked him out, he was living with another woman. And then when she kicked him out, he ended up, I think apparently he was living in a rooming house for a while. And then he got this apartment. But I didn't know any of that until
later on. Anyway,
like after everything was over with us. So, but then probably I would say by Christmas time, we were like, for sure by December, I think we were together almost like every night by that point. Like I don't remember ever going back to that basement apartment or him not being at my place. But so things were good. Like I was really like so in love. Like I would walk down the street and see friends and people would be like, "You're glowing." I'm like, "I'm in love."
What did your parents think of him?
They loved him. They thought he was awesome. He won them over. His stories of graduating second in his class from University of Waterloo and going to live in California and working during the tech boom. And he had these very confabulated, grandiose stories of, this big corporate career. And he's like, I would say, "Oh, I want to go here." He's like, "Oh, I've been there." I'm like, "Wow, you've been to so many places," and he lived in China for a few years and he lived in Japan for a year, and he just seems to have been everywhere. So, my parents were they were charmed by him too. Within, weeks of meeting them, he started joking. He would call my parents his not-in-laws, which I thought was actually kind of funny. And he would call my mom Ma, and I swear to God, they talked more on the phone than him and I. Well, I mean, I live with him, but like they talked on the phone all the time. It got to the point where he'd be like, "Let's FaceTime your mom." I'm like, "Oh my God, really? Like, do we have to?" But, things were good. I remember he came back over to my house one night in November after one of his family court dates, and he was really distraught about it. And I said to him, like, we have to get you a good lawyer, because his ex was using a very well-known high profile family lawyer in Toronto, who's just, when people say the name of that lawyer, they're like, because they know, he's bad. So I arranged for a consultation for him. It was in January of 2019 to go see equally good family court lawyer. And I remember in that meeting, I went with him and I paid for it. And I remember we asked her, like, when can I meet his son? And she said, well, seeing as the trial is a couple months away, let's just hold off on introducing Heather to your son, because we don't want to rock the boat with your ex. Because she's in that meeting, she said, men tend to be like ostriches, and they'll stick their head in the sand and avoid things, and they compartmentalize. Whereas women were more like, we talk to everyone about like what we're going through. So we waited. We just kept waiting and waiting. And in the just over 3 years I was with him, I actually never met his son, which on hindsight, I'm very glad about. But another thing I should point out, which is kind of crazy to me now that I know the truth, is his ex. So he told me who she was. So I creeped her on Facebook, and it turned out that one of my really good friends was friends with her. It turns out they went to junior school together. So
it's a small world.
It is a small world. I always say Toronto, and maybe York is slightly included, that it's really 2 degrees of separation. Like everybody seems to know everybody 100%. Somehow. And so I told my friend, I'm like, oh, you went to junior school with her. So he messaged her on Facebook, and he said, hey, my best friend is dating your ex. Like, is he a good guy? And she knew who he was. She knew, she had her own similar story that I went through 3 years later. And all she said to my friend was, she said something to like, I don't ever want to talk about that man. I'll let the family court decide. Now, I can't understand what it's like to have a child and want to protect them from knowing the truth that child's father is, a pretty sick dude. But I do wish she could have warned me. She had an opportunity to say, tell your friend to Google this person, or tell your friend to call me. Yeah, she
can tell you what they're not telling you.
So, yeah. So that all being said, had she told me, I could have very easily been like, oh, she's just jealous because he's such a great guy. That could have happened. But yes. So I was not warned by her, but that's okay. So, and my friend actually didn't tell me about that until maybe a year later. Oh, wow. That he had reached out to her to ask her, or maybe he did. I can't remember now.
So with that information within that year, how are you and him?
We were amazing. The only thing over pretty much our entire relationship that we ever fought about was the family court, his ex, and not meeting the kid. We've never fought about money, even though he never really seemed to have that much, but I always have done well. So I didn't, especially when we were in Toronto until we moved up to Aurora together, I never really noticed how little he contributed.
And did you guys have shared accounts?
Never a shared account. But he officially moved in with me slightly after a year of meeting each other. So I think it was September 2019 is when he first moved in. He officially moved in with me to my condo. And then a year later, we moved to Aurora in September 2020.
Yeah.
But no, things were good. So another thing that happened in that meeting with the lawyer is she said to him that you need to get a real job. You need to leave the kitchen company because
she said that to you.
That's what the lawyer said to him.
Okay.
Because she said you've planted distrust in the other side's minds by going from being, corporate software guy to, a kitchen cabinet installer. And you're showing them that you're not really living up to who you can be. So maybe it was a week after that, I was actually out getting my hair done and I was sitting in a chair and I got a text message from him and he's like, I quit the kitchen cabinet company. I was like, okay. Never. I didn't think twice, but I was like, and I also knew that to find a full-time corporate job can be a full-time job. So all of a sudden, you know, he's not working. So he's not really even, I don't think he paid me any rent. We decided what was fair when he moved in with me was for him to pay what he'd been paying for his basement apartment, because it also, like I said, I didn't need his money. And I figured it would allow him to save because apparently, you know, his ex had sold their family home and he still hadn't seen his portion of it. But the truth is he never contributed anything to that family home.
So that's why he didn't get anything back.
Right.
Gotcha.
So that also happened. And then the other sort of significant thing that happened that winter was, I remember we were planning to go away. And I am very anti all-inclusive resorts. I've never enjoyed them, but I had all these Amex travel points. So I looked into what I could use them for. And so I booked us into a 1 week at a really nice resort in Dominican. And he said, oh, I have to renew my passport, but he had plenty of time to do it. And then, we were supposed to be leaving on a Sunday. And on the Friday, I remember I was downtown with clients and my phone rang. It was him and I didn't answer. And he sent a message. He's like, call me as soon as you can. So I called him as soon as I could. And he's like, you're never going to believe this, but my passport didn't arrive. It's not in on time. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we're leaving in 2 days. He's like, I can't go. I don't have a passport. I now know if you really want, you can get a passport in 1 day. But the truth is, and again, I didn't know this until September of 2021, he was never going to be able to go traveling with me because he can't get a passport. Because
why can't he get a passport? Because
he's so behind in child support from his first marriage with his 2 sons from that marriage that I didn't even know existed. That he's the family responsibility office fro.
So what did he tell you? You just said it didn't come in?
Yeah, he said his buddy from Georgetown was his what do they call it? Like his
like a reference.
His reference. Like that, yeah. And so when they called to get a reference, this guy didn't get back to them in time. So he's like, it's my buddy's fault. But the truth is, I also learned later that he has no friends. Like, that guy wasn't his friend. That was just one of his many made up stories. So the trip, unfortunately, I didn't read the fine print, was non-refundable non-transferable. So I ended up going by myself down to this really nice resort for a week. And
that sounds amazing though.
I was fine. Like, I was a bit
bummed.
But I mean, I was bawling my eyes out the day I was leaving, and I'll never forget this. He got down. I was sitting on the closed toilet lid in the washroom because I was still packing up my cosmetics. I was just crying. And he came in and he got down on the floor. He kneeled down and he put his hands on my knees and he looked at me. He's like, I love you so much, Heather. I would marry you right now if I could. Like, you have to know how much I love you. I'm like, I know, but I can't believe I'm going by myself. And he's like, it'll be okay. He's like, I'm going to go to the passport office first thing Monday morning and I'm going to try, worst case, I'll get a 1-way ticket and, I'll fly home. I'm like, okay. But I swear to you, it just never happened. And by midweek, I was like, forget it. Like, I eased into the fact that I was down here by myself and it wasn't so bad. I think like the people at the resort, especially one of the chefs, they were just so sweet. And like every morning I'd go down to breakfast and they would make me something like a really healthy green smoothie or a fruit smoothie. Like, they made me stuff that wasn't on the menu. And I think they kind of like, I don't want to use the word pity, but I think they were like,
they wanted to take care of you.
Yeah, it's not normal for like a single I think it was an adult, like a couple's resort, right? So here I am all by myself.
Like, what's going on here?
Right.
Yeah, that's okay.
It was fine. I got a lot of massages and walked on the beach and swam in the ocean. It was totally fine. But I was happy to come home and he was waiting there with like open arms at the airport for me and things were awesome. But it was pretty crazy.
So when you came back, when did you started feeling that things are changing, or not yet? Like, you still went out another 6 months.
Oh my God, things were great. So things were great all through 2019. Things were good all through in 2019. That year for my birthday's in October, he sent me electronic plane tickets. We were supposed to be going to Italy that next spring, but neither of us ever predicted what was going to happen with COVID. But even through like COVID, things were good. I mean, the only thing we really fought about was family court, not meeting his son. And the family court it was such a saga throughout our whole relationship. It was like he was supposed to have a court date in March, and then something would happen and it would get pushed and it would get pushed. And every time I'd be like, well, when, like, don't you think I could meet him? Like, he said, you heard what the lawyer's name was actually also Heather. He's like, you heard what Heather said, that we should wait till we have a settlement. I'm like, but that was like a year ago. Like that was 2 years ago. In June of 2020, I got a phone call from a girlfriend that she saw him on Bumble. She called me and she said, I have to tell you something. I saw Jace on Bumble, but it's him, but it's not him. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, well, it's pictures of him, but it's a different name. And I'm like, well, it's impossible. Like, we're so in love. We're in lockdown. Like, how could he be? There's no way. There's no way.
And people take out people's information all the time.
All the time. It's happened to me.
It is a real thing.
It is a real thing. So, when I asked him about it, but I swear to God, the weirdest thing, I remember talking to that friend, and as soon as I hung up with her, he called me. And I almost like now wonder if he had my phone bugged or something, because I am not a good poker player, and I couldn't probably hide in my voice. I remember saying, like, when do you think you're going to be home? And he's like, why? I was like, well, we need to talk. He's like, why? What's going on? I'm like, I don't want to talk about it on the phone, but I must have said something to him on the phone, because he came rushing home even though it was the lockdown, and he, by this point, was also working for Oracle because he got his corporate job. He was doing a moonlighting construction job during the lockdown. So he came flying home, and he was showing me like proof on his phone that he had like emailed about the profile, and it was down. And he's like, it's probably my ex's brother-in-law because I have dirt on him. And
did you ask what that dirt was?
I do. I don't want to say it.
Yeah, of course
out of respect, but yeah, he told me what it was. And but I now know firsthand, this is what he also does, is he'll gather dirt on you or have something against you to blackmail against you when you threaten him to go to the cops or do something to bust him. But so things were good. I mean, I sold my condo in the spring of 2020, and he always said he was more of a suburban guy. So we started looking for places to rent, not buy, because again, he didn't have the money because his money was still all tied up. And I had said, I am willing to leave Toronto, but here's, the pockets of where I'm willing to live outside of the city, which were basically certain pockets of Aurora, King City. I liked Kleinburg. I like bigger area. Like, I didn't want to live in a subdivision where every house looks like. So, and his son lives in Richmond Hill. So when the place we rented in Aurora came up on the market, we jumped on it because it was this really cute house on 5 acres of land. And I just thought, how great. So we moved to Aurora. Things were good. I also, in the fall of 2020, bought a furniture and decor business from a friend, sort of through a loose friend, an acquaintance really. And the house in Aurora was so big that I transformed the entire lower level that was about 3,000 feet with 14-foot ceilings into the furniture and decor showroom. So I was, it was hard because we were still in lockdown a lot, but I was starting to reach out to designers and stagers, and things were starting to go pretty good. It was picking up. I was growing the Instagram organically, and I was having fun with it. And so when things really started to change was probably by like June of 2021. He was working all the time, it seemed like, on job sites doing contracting jobs, and he never really wanted to do anything, and the world was opening up, and he just seemed to not be engaged, right? Like I got in 2019, I got my motorcycle license. So after our first summer of riding around, he was like, you should get your license. So I got a license, and I got my first bike, and then I sold that bike, and I got a bigger bike, and we were supposed to, do that together, but we were barely doing anything,
So he went from being super romantic, super spontaneous to just.
Yeah. Like kind of moody. And there were some other things that were starting to happen. Like, in the article, it talks about the crime, right? And so the first thing that ever went missing, my parents came down to the condo for a weekend, I think in like September of 2019. So we'd been together for a full year. And all of a sudden, my mom couldn't find her diamond engagement ring. And I don't think it was it's not the first, like it was her upgrade engagement ring. So it was a pretty nice diamond. And we just chalked it up to like, we couldn't find it. And I said to my mom, I'm like, we'll just, when you guys go, cause it was 1,000 square foot condo. It wasn't that big. I'm like, it's probably here somewhere, but with 4 adults, like we'll find it. Jace and I tore that condo apart.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't find it.
Is it because it was in his pocket?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and another thing that happened, Christmas of 2019, on Black Friday of 2019, Jace ordered a brand new iPhone 11 that was supposed to be my alleged Christmas gift that year. And it got delivered, and our concierge at my old building, it was a very small boutique building. She would sometimes put the packages right outside your door and she'd knock. And it's not like I lived in a big building. There was only 4 other units on my floor and we were all friends. Everyone knew each other. And all of a sudden this brand new iPhone went missing. So we had to call the property manager. We called the condo board. Like we called Apple, we called the police. I wouldn't know until September 2021 after the fight. And when I was in the computer that he had in fact received the iPhone and turned around and sold it on Kijiji. And I feel terrible because we almost got that concierge fired, but that went missing. And sometimes I just felt like, I was like, poor Jace, like he just has such bad luck. Like another thing that happened when we moved to Aurora, all of a sudden I was like, well, do you have your portion of the rent saved? Because you have to pay first and last month's rent. And he's like, oh, I don't have it. And I'm like, how can you not have it? Like you're moonlighting this job and you're working for Oracle. He's like, oh, I just had to pay the lawyer this and I had to give my ex more child support. And it was always the perfect excuse for him. So when we moved in to Aurora, so I paid first and last month's rent, and then our landlord wanted a further damage deposit. So Jace agreed like he would pay the damage deposit. So he sent an e-transfer to our landlord, but lo and behold, he sent it to the wrong email, which again, I'm sure it's all a lie. But he showed us the screenshot. He's like, look, it went from my account, like to this email. But you have to understand this guy can also Photoshop anything. So, but some days I just felt like, I'm like, gosh, poor Jace. Like he just has such bad luck, between like the phone, now the deposit missing, like, I don't get it. Like I never thought he was swindling everybody. Yeah. So what happened that summer, like things honestly were good. Like
just little hiccups here and there with that.
Like we had one of our little cute morning routines was like, he literally would roll over every morning and hold me and spoon me. And I would, just lie there feeling so secure and safe. And then he would go to leave and I would grab his arm and pull it back. And I'd be like, 1 more minute. And we would lie there for another minute. And then he would get up and go. And he would never leave the house without coming in and saying like, I want a kiss, give me a kiss, bye, I'm leaving. And he would call me like,
I love women's interpretations of men's voice because we're such Neanderthal. It's not you, but every guy is like, what did dad say? Well, you know who he is. He's like this. I'm like, we do not talk like that. Yeah. But I love it.
Oh, he kind of does. He definitely I used to say to him, like, you mumble, like you're mumble. I'm like,
you don't mumble. Yeah. I just love it. Anyway, go on.
But he like, wherever he was, he would like, we were in constant contact, like sometimes it'd be to the point where like, are you calling me again? Are you for real? This is crazy. And then by July, I'll never forget that July 2021, he came home one day early from a job site. It was a Friday. He was apparently that night going to meet some prospective new clients to give a quote for, to meet them to talk about a big renovation. So he came home from the job site. We went and took the car, which was really my car, to the car wash. He got a haircut. He took a bath. I helped him pick out his outfit and off he goes to meet these new clients. I think he said in Ajax or something. And he was messaging me throughout the night, just saying, this is going to be huge and I'll need furniture and we're going to work together. I'm like, I'm so proud of you. And he's like, I love you so much. And he came home that night and he crawled into bed and he was so frisky. And it was probably like 1:30 in the morning. I was like, babe, I'm so tired. Just tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now he must have been a bit hungover because then the next day, I remember on Saturday, he was lying on the couch in the office all day. I was like, let's go do something. Like it's summer. And he was like, And I was trying the following weekend, my cousins who lived in Aurora, they were having a barbecue pool party. And I remember saying, what time do you think you'll be done with your son next Sunday? so I can let them know what time will come by. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, roughly. He's like, I don't know. And I said to him, I remember all I said was, okay, don't worry about it. You go do your family. I'll do mine. Come when you can. Mm-hmm. And he used that comment to basically start to pull away from me. So that night he didn't come to bed. He slept on the couch. The next day he went to see his son, and he came back from seeing his son. And he said, I'm still kind of really upset about that comment you made, Heather. I need to clear my head. I'm going to go for a motorcycle ride. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, we've done nothing all weekend. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand, I'm not from Aurora. I didn't have a lot of friends. I had no friends in Aurora, really. And where we lived, it's not like we had neighbors right next door. Like, we lived next door to a 5-acre vacant piece of property. Like, we were on 5 acres. It wasn't hustle bustle city. Like, I could just walk and meet people. So he left, and I think I started drinking. My mom thinks he drugged me, but he came back, and I remember just going off on him, just saying like, are you seeing somebody? What's going on? And he was like, I have to go get cigarettes. So he left again. Then he came back. And the long and the short of it is, whatever happened that night, because I kind of don't remember all the details. I think I not blacked out, but I don't recall because I was a little tipsy, but he left that night. And we never slept in the same bed or under the same roof ever again. So a couple days, he came back the next night, and I guess he slept on the couch. And then I said, look, I'm going to give us some space. I'm going to go down to the city for a couple days. I wrote him this like 10-page love letter, just apologizing, which I left for him at the house because I left while he was gone at work. And most couples, like a week into it, you forgive, right? You're like, okay, like, well, I'm sorry.
Time,
right.
I'm wrong. You're wrong. Whatever.
Well, what happened with us is it just got worse. Like, he literally stopped coming home. And although he did agree to go to some therapy, and we went to 2-hour-long counseling sessions together, and the therapist was very sure he could fix us. And he was like, you're such a lovely couple. Like, I feel like I can make it.
I can help.
So I agreed. The deal was we agreed to, like, I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks of therapy. Mm-hmm. And if at the end of all those sessions, if Jay still couldn't forgive me, I had to accept that. And I was like, okay, but the therapist was so sure he would fix us. And I felt so sure too. But the whole month of August, I literally cried myself to sleep every fucking night, because all of a sudden he's not coming home. And whereas he would call and text me every day, all day long, I started now not hearing from him for 2, 3, 4 days at a time. And I just kept thinking, it's going to get better. He just needs his space. And he was saying things to me like, I haven't been this dark since my mother died. I don't know if I can ever trust you around my son.
And all this from that comment.
All that from that.
I mean, comment. I don't want to downgrade the comment, but like, it's the
all that, not just the comment, but whatever happened that night in the fight that I was a bit drunk in. But the truth is, I know in my heart and my soul, I didn't say anything that was that preposterous at all, because that's not who I am. Mm-hmm. So, another time he came by the house and he said to me, I wouldn't be this upset with you, Heather, if I'd walked in and caught you fucking somebody in our bed. And I was like, how can you say that to me?
That's very drastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was August of 2021. And here I am, like, in this big house all by myself. Every night I would set the alarm, and I was just kind of terrified. But at the same point, I'm resilient, and I already had a plan B cooking in my mind. And that was, I was going to have a girlfriend from Toronto come up and like live with me. We were going to like transform the house and do like weekend, yoga retreats in the house. And so like I had a plan B, but then really what happened was he missed he missed our therapy session, and he lied to me about it because of that alarm. I had all the notifications on my phone of when every door or window opened. Mm-hmm. And when I went to therapy that morning, he told me he was in the city, but in fact he wasn't. And he went into the house while I was at therapy. And I was like, that liar. But he came by the house that night. He called me while I was on the way to therapy. And I remember saying to him something like, Jace, like, God gave us a second chance when we met. Like, you met me and you hadn't been in a very happy relationship. And for me, like, it's just, we have something that's worth saving. And he even said in therapy, I remember he said to the therapist, like, he's got one foot out the door, but I still have his heart. He's like, Heather still has my heart. And he would say things to me throughout that month, like, you're my best friend, Heather. I trust you more than anyone else. Like, even if we can't work us out, because I really feel like I should be like, live by myself and go live in a 1-bedroom apartment again, you know, be like my ex and not, you know, not be with anyone. And I'm like, and I looked and I was like, well, what about the furniture I bought for your son's room? And he's like, fuck the furniture, just get rid of it. And I was like, okay, well, So, and I would just say to him, like, I just can't believe you're like walking out on us. Like it does. I'm like in the back of my mind that entire month, something just wasn't making sense. And so often I would try. So when I bought the business, I bought a big desktop Mac computer. And he was the primary user. And when I would log in, it would try to talk to my laptop. And where we lived in Aurora, the internet was so painfully slow that it would take half an hour just to boot up the screen. So every time I'd be like, what's your password for the Mac? He's like, why? You have your own. I'm like, because it's so slow. And so I stopped asking. And then one day I didn't realize in Chrome, it saves passwords. And he would often use my laptop to have 2 computers going at a time. And all of a sudden I started seeing a pattern with his password that he would use. And so I tried it on the desktop Mac and I got into the computer. And all I can say is in that moment, this was the Friday of Labor Day weekend in September. So it's now been like 6 weeks of this fight. And all I can say is when I got into the computer and was able to get into his emails, because he had many. Yeah. I couldn't I don't even know where to start with what I found. First, I found that he was basically on multiple dating platforms and had been. I got as far back as like 2019. So he never stopped. He was, and when I got into one of his dating profiles, I don't know what most men do, but he was talking to hundreds of women, not a couple, hundreds. And that's just one platform, right? And then I started seeing emails for, you know, this Tiffany necklace for sale or this thing for sale. And I remembered my mom for months had been saying, she's missing things. Have I seen this? Have I seen this necklace? Have I seen this bracelet? Have I seen this ring? I'm like, no. And so my parents have 2 places, a country place and a city place. She's like, well, maybe it's in the city. And she's like, I'll check when I go down, and it wouldn't be in the city. And to be honest, I just thought maybe she's misplacing stuff. But my mom, you know, asked the cleaning lady, and the cleaning lady was so insulted. She quit because she'd worked for my parents for a really long time. Yeah. And there were ads for him selling her stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
so it was such a gut punch.
It was such a gut punch.
Yeah.
Such a gut punch. I think that, I don't know. I mean, all the women is one thing, but just stealing from my family. And then other things started to make sense to me. And there was a friend of mine in 2019. We were at his cottage, and the week before, this friend of mine had bought a condo with me, an investment condo. And he asked me if I could go to his house to meet the appraiser because he was still at the cottage. And I was like, yeah, sure. So he told me where he hid his spare key and the alarm code. And I probably wrote it on a piece of paper. And I probably told Jace, like, oh, I'm going over to so-and-so's house. You know, I have to let the appraiser in. And lo and behold, somebody who knew the alarm code and where the key was went back to this friend's house and stole 2 very, very, very expensive watches and some cash. And nobody ever suspected it was Jace, but it wasn't until September 2021 that I actually got confirmation from another friend that it was. Like, they saw him wearing the watch, one of the watches. I was like, oh, damn. So, oh, hey, buddy. So it was pretty gut wrenching. But so the other thing that I realized was that friend who found him on Bumble had sent me an email. And in that email, she had sent some links that I remember looking at them really quickly, some of them. But what I didn't really realize at all was that Jace is really Jason Porter. And that in 2011 and the end of 2011, Jason Porter was all over the 6 o'clock news, and he was dubbed the Online Romeo because he had been meeting women online and defrauding them and stealing from them.
So does he?
You're ruining the podcast. You're ruining the podcast.
How can you ruin the podcast with that face? So would he target like specifically like women who are obviously doing well for themselves? Or
you would think that like,
or did you just shoot in the dark?
I think it's like, let's throw his famous saying, let's throw as much spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. Like, I was pretty shocked when I got into like the one dating profile. He was talking to women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even up to 70.
Get on that will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you found all this information.
Yes.
Your world crashes right there.
So
what's the next move? What do you do?
The next move was, so when I first got into the computer, the crazy thing was I actually called him right away because I was just in shock. I was like, what? So I called him and he didn't answer. And I just sat at that computer for hours and just took so many screenshots and just kept screenshotting. And then a girlfriend called me and I was like, I told her what was going on. And she was like, oh my God. And while I was on the phone with her, he called me back. So I'm like, oh, it's him. Let me take the phone call.
So were you trying to keep cool?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was trying to keep cool. So,
but you're not good at poker.
I'm not good at poker. So I remember in that. So I got on the phone call with him and he said, you called? And I said, well, yeah, it's Friday, the long weekend. I was just wondering what you're up to. Like, he basically said something like, he's working all weekend, but maybe we'll get together on Sunday. He'll come by Sunday for dinner. I'm like, okay. And then I remember saying, this is where I probably gave away. I said, I feel like I don't know you anymore. I just feel like I don't even know who you are anymore, Jace. And he's like, what do you mean? I just said, well, up until, a month ago, we did everything together. And now I'm going days without hearing from you, let alone seeing you. And like, we're supposed to be working on us according to the therapist. And this doesn't feel like working. And he's like, don't worry, it'll be over soon. I'm like, over soon, like we're breaking up or like you'll be home. He's like, no, I'm feeling better today. I'll be home soon. We'll talk about it on Sunday.
Did he talk about where he stayed in these like 2, 3?
Yeah. He told me he was staying at his office in Toronto or literally sleeping. He had been driving around all summer in my dad's Mercedes SUV. Like, and he said he was sleeping, like basically living out of the car. I'm like, that's not, and I would say this to him, like, that's ridiculous. We have this huge house. Mm-hmm. Like you could sleep in a different bedroom. Like this is ridiculous. And he just said, I need my space. He's like, I'm afraid if I'm home and around you, like. So
do you think that he was seeing other women at that time?
Oh, I know for a fact he basically had moved in with somebody during this time.
Oh my gosh. The plot thickens.
And I think what he realized is when he got out of, so back it up to 2011, 2012, when he was arrested for multiple counts of fraud and breaking and entering. And I guess he did a plea deal. He pled guilty to get a plea deal and he got sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Now, I knew he had been to prison.
Oh, he told you?
We had a long heart to heart, but his story was very different than the truth. Very different. He told me basically he had witnessed 2 off-duty cops like rough up like or flirt with a woman and make her feel
uncomfortable.
And he stepped in and he got in a fight with them and that landed him in jail. And then because he's also Italian, one of his cousins was in the mob and they were using him to get to his cousin and he got bad legal advice and blah, blah, blah. So he was a victim. So I was just like, I can't believe, like, and I would always say to him, like, I am so sorry you had to do that. Like, that really so sucks. But, that's not you. You're not that person. Like, and you paid for, you did time. Like, you paid for whatever you could have done wrong. So it's in the past. And I used to always joke, I'm like, even Martha Stewart's been to jail. Like, it's not such a big deal, right? Like, celebrities go to jail.
Snoop D-O double G.
Right. So.
Okay, so he went to federal prison for 3 years.
Well, he was sentenced to 3 years, but I guess he probably only ended up doing about 18 months. And when he got out in 2014, within weeks, he was back online, met his ex, and he'd always told me they met at a party, but in their family court records, it talks about how he met her on Match.com. Within a few months of meeting her, she's pregnant. And think he realized how great it is to have a woman, like a main squeeze, who does well and provides for him. So he can basically continue to lie and manipulate and steal and live his double, triple, quadruple life right under your nose. So when she, I guess, caught on and she kicked him out, and I don't know what happened there.
So did he come rushing home when he found everything? Because those kind of people, like, they're always on edge because they know, like, they're always looking behind their back,
he used to always say to me, he's like, you always have to think 5 steps. He used to say to me, Heather, as a parent, you've always got to think 5 steps ahead. Like, if I do this, what's the repercussion? But now I know he's always thinking 5 steps ahead because he's always got his plan. I would have been plan A, but he probably had a plan B, a plan C, a plan D.
The whole alphabet.
And there was a couple times we would have like little tiffs, and he would say to me, like, are you breaking up with me? And he would say it in this tone where I'd be like, no, of course not, babe. But now I think in that moment, in that tone, he didn't have a solidified plan B yet. Because I think he probably got a bit lazy with me because things were good. Like like my friend, like people were like, you're so lucky. Like, he's so great. You're having so much fun.
Everything was going so well.
I mean, now in hindsight, a lot of my friends are saying things like, well, we always thought you were a bit too like refined for him or too good for him. Like, he just really isn't in your...
Yeah, but hindsight's always 2020, right? Of course, they're going to be like, no, I never liked him actually, right? You're like, well, where were you?
Yeah. And now all my friends who are missing things are like, fuck, did he steal that from my party? And I'm like, probably. Probably.
Okay, so what happened after that? Because you're just waiting for this double life of a man to come home. So we
have this conversation, and it's stated that he's going to come home Sunday night. We're going to have dinner together. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well. Then I remember telling him how I saw a coyote, like broad daylight that day, going up and down the driveway, and how I was worried about Baxter. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry, babe. And then I remember saying at one point, I'm like, I hear crickets. Like, where are you? He's like, oh, I just got back to the showroom, like to the shop in Toronto, and we're like unpacking the car. I'm like, that's really late for a Friday of a long weekend. And I'm like, I grew up in Toronto. Like, I don't ever recall hearing crickets, but he wasn't in Toronto. So we say goodbye. And I kid you not, within like 5 minutes of that phone conversation, I'm bumped out of the emails, and on the one dating app I was in, it was like, sorry to see you go. So he must have somehow figured out, I don't know, I was on to him. So then what happened? My friend, I call her back. I'm freaking out, and it's dark now, and I'm terrified, and I've got the doors locked and the alarm on, and I felt like a prisoner in my own house practically. And she ended up taking an Uber up from Toronto to my house in Aurora. And we stay up really late, just like looking at all these screenshots. And she's laughing her head off because she can't believe it. She never liked him, and he never liked her. That was the one friend. Okay. Those two did not quite vibe. And he actually tried to turn me kind of against her, but it didn't work. So she was laughing at some of the messages he was sending with these women. She was like, she's like, this is his job, Heather. This is his job. He's like a professional scammer. I'm like, And so the next day, my sister and her boyfriend were coming over to the showroom because they were coming to look at furniture. So I remember messaging my sister super early saying, you guys have to come now. And she's like, why? I'm like, just get here. So my sister and her boyfriend came, another girlfriend came, and I told everybody what was going on, and everybody was just kind of shocked. And my sister's boyfriend said, well, you have to call the police. And I'm like, you're right. Like, the Online Romeo is still online Romeoing. Like, they need to know. And he's stolen all our mom's stuff. Like, this is crazy. So I called the York Region Police, and they come over, 2 officers and the sergeant, and they take a full report, and they basically tell me, well, there's nothing we can do for you. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, you guys aren't worried that the online, like the social predators, I can show you he's still online. And they're like, it's not a crime, Heather. Unless one of those women comes forward, it's not a crime what he's doing. So right then and there, I swear they just saw me as like a jealous girlfriend. They just were like, she's upset because he's cheating on her. But I'm like, they're not. I'm like, oh my God. You're not listening. You're not listening to me. And then they said to me, they're like, well, has he ever hurt you? I'm like, not on. I've said physically. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, not on purpose. Like, he used to do this really crazy thing with me where he would like sit on me and tickle me. And it was kind of like playing and playful, but it hurt.
Yeah,
like he would actually kind of hurt. Like I couldn't breathe. I'd be like, and he would videotape the whole thing. And he wouldn't get off of me until I'm like, I love you. And then he would get off me. And I must have 20 of these videos. And I don't know if that was just control, him trying to really control me. But I said to the cops, no, not really, not on purpose. And I said, anyway, I don't feel safe because look, here's this one document I found from his first marriage that said he's like been abusive, that he's punched holes in walls and he's had to go to anger management. Like I have seen this guy lose his temper. This guy shoots steroids. Like he likes to get big. He has some rage in him. Like I've seen him lose his temper. He would snap at me sometimes and say, don't push me, Heather. I wasn't afraid to leave the mother of my child. I'm not afraid to leave you. I'm like, okay, like go. Like I don't need, but so the cops basically did nothing. And I said, well, I think I'm going to change the locks. And they're like, well, you rent this house, correct? I'm like, correct. And they're like, you're both on the lease. I'm like, well, we are, but I'm the only one who's been paying the rent. My company's been paying the rent for like the last 6 months. He's not contributed. They're like, it doesn't matter. His name's on the lease. I'm like, well, is it? Because it's not really his name. It's not really his name, but they didn't really seem to care. They just I swear they chalked it up to like a domestic situation. And I'm just an upset girlfriend who's caught her boyfriend cheating.
Yeah.
And so the cops left. I changed all the locks and that cost like $1,000 because it was such a big house and so many doors. And then I made my sister call my parents and tell them what was going on. Cause I said, Jen, you have to call them. I don't even know how to tell them this. Like my mom's they're going to be so crushed. And, my mom is such a sweet angel. She's in her 70s. She got in her car and drove an hour to see me from her house to my house. And I was in bed at that point, kind of catatonic because I didn't know what to do. And she crawled into bed with me and she just like held me and I was bawling. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. So the next day, I somehow probably slept that night. The next day, my parents that's what the cops said. They said, well, your parents have to go to their own police station. And because of where they were living in the country, they went to the OPP, filed a report. And my dad said to the OPP, he's also driving around in my Mercedes. He was supposed to sell it. Then he said he wanted to buy it. And he's sent me one e-transfer of $500, but the plates are expired and he has no insurance. There's no ownership has been transferred. I want my car back. And the OPP, I guess, said to my dad, send him a text message saying you want your car back at such and such a time. And if you don't get it back, you're going to report it stolen. That should get his attention. So everything just happened so quickly and chaotically. So the next thing that happened, I guess my dad sent Jace that text. Jace calls me and I'm with my one girlfriend out at the house. I'm like, oh my God, it's him calling. And the one thing the cop said to me was, I'm like, well, what do I do if he comes back? They're like, you can always call 911. If he comes back and you feel unsafe, call 911. So he was calling. Then he sent me a text message and he said, what the fuck is going on? I'll be home in 20 minutes. I'm like, why are you, if you're in Toronto, you're not 20 minutes away. Like where, I'm thinking, where the F are you? But I figured it out. And he comes flying home. I am on the phone with 911. I call 911 right away. So my friend Kristen is in my walk-in closet on her cell phone talking to my parents. I'm on the landline talking to 911. And I hear him pull up in my dad's car and I can hear him putting his key in one door and it's not working. He goes to another door. It's not working. Next thing you know, he's come in through the dining room window. He somehow managed to unlatch the window from the outside, which I don't know how because everything was closed. And he comes crawling in through the window and I come flying at our bedroom. The master bedroom in this house was on the main floor and I come flying out with the cordless phone and I'm just pure adrenaline shock. And I'm like, I'm on the phone with 911. The police are on their way. Jason, like, I know everything. You have more kids and blah, blah, blah. I'm going off. And he casually goes to the coffee maker. He had this fancy espresso machine and he proceeds to make himself a coffee. And he looks at me. He's like, I don't have any other kids. Those aren't my kids. I never cheated on you. Like, again, he's just cool, calm and collected, denying it. So then the cops come. The woman cop stays with me in the house. The male cop takes Jace outside. And next thing you know, they're talking and they come back. The woman cop comes back and she's like, we're just waiting for the sergeant to come. I'm like, why is the sergeant coming? Like, he was here yesterday. oh, because he's claiming you assaulted him. I'm like, what? So that night in July, when we had that fight, apparently I assaulted him, which if you were to see him next to me, it's impossible. He could just hold one hand out and I'd be like a cartoon character going like, no. Like he's that much bigger than me. There's no way I assaulted him. But apparently he had some evidence. So, oh my, at this point I'm thinking, what the fuck?
Yeah, like, the world's against you right now.
So my girlfriend who's on the phone with my parents, my cousin she's retired, but she used to be a crown attorney. They call her. She gets them in touch with, it's Sunday night at Labor Day weekend with a good criminal lawyer. So next thing you know, I've like retained this lawyer all within 10 minutes. And the criminal lawyer speaks to the sergeant on my behalf. And then it's explained to me that Jace is not going to press charges tonight. He might, but he's not going to press them tonight. But he is coming back to the home. Even though he hasn't been here for at least 5 weeks, he's decided it's time to claim his stake in our house. And I'm like, that's when I said, are you kidding me? I'm like, but I don't feel safe around him. And that's when they said, well, if you don't feel safe, you should leave. I'm like, how?
But this is your own home. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, my business is in this house. Like, how do I know if I leave tonight, like he's not going to rob me blind tomorrow?
Or like, trash everything. Right. Or whatever.
And the cops basically said, you guys can only take what's yours. Like, so then Jace becomes, I have to give him a key to the place. I have to give him one of the new keys. And Jace, all of a sudden becomes like chivalrous. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to make you leave tonight on a Sunday night. It's already like 10 o'clock, but I'm going to be back tomorrow first thing. And the cops leave, but Jace stays. And then he went into the office and shut the 2 French doors and took a phone cable and wrapped it around the handles so I couldn't get in. And he erased the computer. And sadly, I didn't get all my screenshots off the computer. But, why would an innocent person feel the need to erase a computer?
It's true.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and then he left and I stayed up all night just throwing whatever I could into suitcases and boxes. Cause I'm like, I'm not leaving my Louis Vuitton shoes here. Like I'm not leaving my Louis Vuittons or like my Chanel. Like I have some nice things. I'm like, I'm taking it all with me. Like it's all got to go. And I packed, I just packed, loaded everything in my car. And the next morning left and spent the next kind of few days just trying to regroup and figure out what to do. Like what do I have to do? And because my mom was pressing charges, I think it was a week later, he was actually officially arrested. The conditions on the arrest, include that he's not allowed to communicate with me or my family, or come near us, but that left the house in Aurora in this really gray area. So I spent basically all of September and October just
trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Right? Just extricating myself from the house and selling whatever I could sell. And which included, I did post all the furniture I'd bought for his kids' room on Facebook Marketplace. And somebody was coming on a Friday. It was always a Friday to pick it up. And it was a captain's bed. So it's got these 3 drawers. So I remember thinking, I'll take the drawers out. So when the guy comes, it'll be quicker to get this thing out the door. And I pulled out the drawer, and behind the drawer, I saw all this stuff under the bed. I'm like, what's this? And it's almost like getting into the computer all over again. And I pulled out this like bag that had all this stuff in it. And then a stack of family court documents. I'm like, oh my God.
Maybe there's even more.
So the saddest thing of all is in February 2019, that was his last family court appearance. And that was when the final order came in that he was only ever going to have 2 supervised visits with his son. So there was no family court case. There was no lawyer retained. There was
nothing.
And this leaves me to think now, like every time he would leave the house, to whether it was to go to Oracle or go to family court or go on a guy's night or guy's weekend or a business meeting, none of that was ever happening. So I now have to assume that every time he was leaving the house, he was either going out on a date or going to steal or just basically up to no good. And that's nauseating.
So tell me this man's in prison or something. Where is this man now?
He's like up in like Newmarket, East Gwillimbury. He did move back into the house in Aurora, but not until like mid-October because again, as I'd mentioned, he had been with this other woman, but I'm not sure of all the details. That woman did call me last fall and we spoke on the phone for a long time. But I guess he went back to the house in Aurora, got a roommate for a couple months because I kept in touch with the landlord because we had a good relationship. And he stopped paying the rent there. And then I think did a midnight run in February and moved into his new place in February.
Wow.
So I don't know how I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
So I guess looking back, what do you think that he was in love with you? Or do you think everything was just a long con?
I think it was a bit of a long con. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if people like him are capable of real love. I think he must have enjoyed my company to have stuck around for as long as he did. I think COVID changed a lot of things. I think had COVID not happened, we potentially would have broken up sooner. I mean, I'd like to think he loved me, but I don't think he's capable of it.
And like, if you could go back and give yourself a little bit of a self-talk or whatever, what would you tell yourself? You know, things move too quickly to take a step back.
Right.
It sucks though, because like there are like good men out there and there are great men who do want to like sweep women off their feet.
True. But I think this kind of sweeping off your feet, it did happen very quickly and very intensely. And like I said, I really relished it because I'd never experienced it like anything like this before. And I do think people want their fairy tale romance. Well, also, but even like the red flags, you know, some of the stuff I've heard on, you know, women or men who survive these narcissistic relationships, like I can't beat myself up for it because he's a smooth talker. And when I would kind of confront him on some of the red flags being, why aren't we meeting why can't we go to the family cottage this summer? There was always a story that made him kind of like the victim and he felt bad for him. And, you know, so you wouldn't want to push it. Or I swear, like there were times where I felt like I was losing my mind because I know I said I know I said this to you, but they just twist everything. They twist it. So you start going a bit crazy almost.
Well, they gaslight you too, right?
Yeah. It's like a subtle, like there's different kinds of gaslighting though. Like that, there was like a subtle one. I think a lot of our relationship was fluctuating between the idealization and the devaluing. And it was like a yo-yo until the very end with the discarding aspect of the relationship. And, you know, I have a text message that I sent to him. I was just like in August, I'm like, I can't believe you're like throwing us away. I'm like, I can't believe you're just walking out on our life. It just, it's so painful. It's so hurtful. Like you have to forgive me. And all of that time, it was not me. It wasn't my fault.
Oh, not at all. No.
Yeah.
Now, do you find you have a little PTSD from like the date after? I have actually been working with this therapist and we've been doing trauma therapy. I think if in the article it mentions, I also very luckily, fortunately spent the winter in Thailand. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. Yeah. So by this time last year, when I was just at this point last year, I was out of the house completely. Whatever was left from the furniture store was in this massive storage locker in downtown Toronto. And I was just trying to sell as much as I could. And I was like, I have to go away. I'm like, I'm going away. I'm going away come hell or high water. Like I just had to go away I'm like, I don't want to be here. I need to go far away where it's warm and I don't know anyone and I can just get some perspective on what happened. So it was hard planning a trip in that state. So I worked with this woman and she helped me plan the trip. And she suggested Thailand because it had just reopened to tourism. And she said it'll be a great opportunity to go. But the bulk of my trip was centered around a healing and wellness retreat because I knew I needed to feel better. And my body, like my adrenal glands were fried. I was just stressed. I was drained complete. Like, yeah. Just and emotionally and physically, like just so sad, you know. People can go on my Instagram. I actually posted many months later, but I posted a video I made of
a selfie video from, I think it was Christmas Eve, and I'm just crying, saying like, I'm so sad, but like, I'm not going to be like this next year. Like I promised myself I won't be like this, but I'm like, I'm just sad. Like, so, and grief is a funny thing. Like you go through sadness and anger and denial, and I can tell you, eventually, but it doesn't happen all in those stages, and you can bounce. Just when I think I'm accepted it, something will happen. Like I've still, this whole past year had, especially since the article came out, people reach out to me who've either known him, which is gut wrenching, but just other women reaching out to me, telling me their stories. But yeah, it's hard talking to the other people who
been through it.
I've managed to like piece together some of my gaps, but there's still quite a few. And the sad thing is, a lot of the other women, I think men too, but
wait, he was talking to men too?
I think so.
What?
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah. He came home one day with these blue suede Jimmy Choo shoes, and I'm like, so my first career, I was a wardrobe stylist.
Okay.
And I don't know any straight woman who would take a man out shopping and buy him blue suede Jimmy Choos.
Is that true?
And I don't know any straight man who would go and probably buy blue suede. Like he's a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy.
Yeah.
Nikes, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Somebody bought him. He stole them or somebody bought them, but I don't know.
That's wild.
Yeah. That's a whole other story, which I can't confirm or deny. Like, I don't know. Like I said, there's so many gaps still, and I'm hoping that maybe one day they all come together. But at the same point, I have to give myself some peace, and I can't keep like going down rabbit holes. But when people do contact me, I will, talk to them, and it's gut wrenching. It's pretty gut wrenching.
This whole story has been wild, Heather. I appreciate you coming on. Is there any way we can somehow help, like, put this guy away? Like, what?
I don't know. Well, I would say like
if I ask our video editor to put a photo of him right here.
Yeah,
we can. Okay,
that could be
photo
good.
Right here, guys.
Like, I would say to anyone, like men or women, if you're on any of the dating apps, like, he goes by other names in the article. It talks about like Don, Donato, Mike. I've got to think. I know he was still actively online dating up until the article came out. I don't know if he still is, but also, if you live in the York region, do not hire him as a contractor. He bought the other half of my company last year for $1 because the other owner was so upset with when he learned the truth.
Yeah.
But he changed the name, but he inherited the Instagram account with something like 2,000 followers, I think, but they've been dropping pretty consistently. But he changed the name of the company from Graphis Design Build to JP Squared Design Build. So anyone on Instagram, if you're following him, like, stop following him. Do not hire him.
Report.
Like, do not hire this man to do anything around your house, because he will steal from you. Okay. On that happy note.
Yeah, on that happy note. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me and letting me share my story.
No.
I feel like maybe there'll be a part 2.
Maybe.
I don't know. If I find out more, I feel like
you definitely have to fill me in.
Yeah.
Well, thanks guys for watching. Appreciate you guys. Thank you again for being on, Heather.
Thank you.
And night.